Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is Dr. Hawthorn here, and today I'm going to give you a short series of Blender tutorial. Whether you are a newbie in 3D modeling or you're using other softwares who wants to switch platform, this tutorial is going to be an easy, quick kickstart to your journey. First of all, my name is Sandra Olga. I'm a researcher and a PhD holder working on virtual reality, 3D modeling, and rendering. My work focuses on interior objects and digitizing history and heritage environment. In this tutorial series, you will go through 5 steps, and each step is not going to take more than 30 minutes of your time. First, we have user interface and navigation basics that covers viewport, layout, menus, and preferences. This will be the perfect first step. Second, we have modeling tools and 3D shape building that covers edit mode, extrusion, scaling, moving objects, and loop cut. Third, we have materials, colors, and texturing. Fourth, we have lighting setup for realistic scenes. Last, but certainly not the least, we have camera placement and final rendering. Exciting, right? Now, let's dive into the software. So before we actually get started in knowing Blender, we must download the software first, right? Now, we have the Blender official website on our screen. And as you can see, there is already Blender 4.5, which is the latest updates. We are having Blender's update every now and then. They're going crazy on the updates. And every time we have some new features, a new function, and it's getting better and better. Don't worry, every time you see a new thing, you can just simply download it and it can adapt to the previous setting you have. Before we actually download the software, we can look at the feature page here. Features including modeling, sculpting, animation and rigging, being a story artist, rendering, simulation, video editing, etc. We do have a lot of different functions Blender, but what we need to know first is to be able to model and to do simple rendering. And this is what we are covering, basically. We are covering in this tutorial series. If we click onto the second button on download, basically Blender already knows more or less which computer you are having. For example, I'm having the MacBook Pro. It's giving me options for downloading the software for Mac OS. And as you know already, in Mac OS, we have different core chip, and depending on which version you are, you download different version. In case you are actually using a PC or a Linux, you can also switch versions. Now, after you download the installing package, then you will probably have DMG file in your downloads. You just have to double click on it and install the software like every other software. In this case, for Apple, we are just dragging and dropping to the application file. Now, of course, I already have Blender installed, asking if I want to replace it or not. After you have everything done, you have the software installed, then you can open the software. When you have the software open, you have the welcome window here, where on the left column, we have new file presets. So you can choose general or 2D animation, sculpting, video editing, depending on what kind of job you want to do. But normally, I'll just stick with general. And on the right-hand side, we have recent files. And it also depends on whether you have already some projects going on. If yes, you will see a list here, at least 5 of them. If not, then basically you won't have anything. You can also open files here if you have anything in your computer, or try to recover the last section. Although you see these 3 words here, but just don't be deceived, because this doesn't always work. What I recommend is if you are doing fabless projects, from time to time, remember to save. And this is what I have been telling my students. you have to save every time you make big move. We will just start with a new file, general, or we can just click anywhere on the screen. When we click on the screen, the welcome box will go away, and what we have here is a cube in the world and some other things around the screen, and I will go through them with you one by one. Let's break down this interface into parts, and as you can see, borders around these places, right? Which is, they are divided already into areas of workplace. And what we have here, let's take a look at the top. And the top, of course, is named top menu. So File, Edit, Render, Window, Help. This is the top menu where you can save or open files, import or export elements. And you can also have some external data packed. And in this case, is that in case you have any other external images or materials that you brought into the file and you want to pack them with your Blender file. Once you pack them with the Blender file, it means that you can just travel with one file. You don't have to bring along your materials and your reference images. Then you have the default, and that is the setup or the factory setup. What we have now is the factory setups, and you can mess up with everything you have here in the software and simply save starter files. And that is for you to open Blender every time with your own setup. As you progress in using in this software, you will start to get to know better how you want things to be in places. You can save your own startup file, or in any case that you want to start over, you want to get used to the factory settings, just load factory settings. Edit. Well, we don't usually use this as much, except for one thing, that is the preferences. Because when we use Blender, there are so many settings that you can just play around. One of the thing is that whether you want to change your input setting from having a numpad or having no numpad, that you want to emulate numpad on the top bar of your letters on the keyboard. I will go through with you in details about this later, but just to have you in line with this. Then we have add-ons and extensions. We don't have to use any add-on or extensions for this tutorial series, but as you progress, maybe this will be a great help. And if you want to just go back to the official page for Blender, you can see there are different types of things. We have demo files for you to get to know the software a bit better. We have one column called extensions. And when you click into that, then you will have a page dedicated to extensions, and they are free and open source add-ons and themes. They are not necessarily official by Blender, but they are officially recognized. If you scroll through the list, you will find some functions that maybe will be useful for you to develop your projects. If you are interested in knowing more, and if you want to get your workflow being easier, you can browse through this list. Now, let's go back to Blender. Next to the top menu, we actually have workspaces. And these workspaces, they are also presets that might be useful for some of your workflow. And they are very literal. If you look at the names here, we have layout, which is by default. When we open Blender for the first time, we have the layout setting. And we have modeling, sculpting for sculptures, UV editing for UV mapping, texture paint if you are a painter, if you want to paint on the texture you already implied. You also have animation, rendering, compositing. These are not new spaces for you to discover. These are presets, and they are just putting them in places that might be handy for you. In case you get lost, just always try to go back to layout. And it's simple as this. For example, if we are on the UV editing user interface. You see two windows here in the center, but don't worry, you can always go back to layout. And then the biggest window we have here is the 3D viewport. And we have the 3D viewport for our modeling. And this is very important that you know how to navigate. But we will leave this after all the introduction to the working area. On the right-hand side, we have two columns here. The first one, the top one, is the outliner. Outliner is basically the archive for our Blender project. So whatever you create in these projects, it should show up here. For example, we have the cube and the cube is highlighted. We have a light. When we want to select the lights, the light is highlighted. We have the camera, which is also highlighted. And then next to this, you have two icons. You should have two icons. You can have more later by toggling other functions, but by default, you should have two. One is an eye that whether you want to show it or hide it in Viewport. And then you have a camera, whether you want to show it or hide it in render. What we need to be careful of is sometimes you hide things on the viewport, it will show up in the render. Sometimes you hide things on the render, but you see it on the viewport. It can deceive you if you are not too familiar with the software, but just don't panic because it's just here. Then below the outliner, we have the properties. And properties panel holds all the properties that you can find in the project. For example, the render property, output property, world property, object property, material properties. And you also have modifiers, which we will go in detail later. There are also some other modifiers to the meshes, but it's to the next level. We can skip this for now. Then, under the 3D viewport, there are two very subtle things. First, we have this little timeline here. And if we are not working on animation, if we are just working on modeling, this timeline can be useful if you want to just create liquid, fire, or blanket, or a pillow, then it will be useful for these kind of things. But if not, we just have to let it be here. Below the timeline, we have an even more subtle bar. It's called the status bar. The status bar is showing you what you are doing or what you are potentially doing. For example, if I am selecting this cube here, and as you can see, when I select this cube, it's showing you options. I'm not moving my mouse because as I move my mouse, these options will change. But you can see on the lower left corner, we have the left mouse button called Select, the middle mouse button called Rotate View, and the right select button, we have options. It's telling you, or it's like a cheat sheet for you. You can see what you want to do. And if I do right click and I am showing list of things that I can use to interact with my cube, it is showing you if you use spacebar, then you can probably do a search and you can search whatever you want to do with the cube. If you are new to Blender, you can always pay attention to this status bar just to know more. But if you are used to the software already, then probably you will just forget about the existence of this menu bar. Now, let's focus back on the 3D viewport. And this is where the most important thing is going to happen when you do the modeling first step. On the viewport, there are two different toolbars, one on the left and one on the right, that can help you navigate in the viewport. What is on the left here, it is basically the functions to interact or to transform the mesh or any elements inside the viewport. We have the moving button, we have the rotate button, we have scaling, and transform, which is the three of them together. Whenever you toggle these buttons, you will see different effects on the mesh. I have selected this cube, and if I have the move toggled, this arrow, and just move around, then you can provide transformation. You can transform these objects inside the viewport. Rotate, there are arches that you can just also click and drag to rotate the cube. Scaling, there are 3 handles with 3 cubes to resize, to scale the objects, or the 3 of them together. But if you were like me, then these gadgets, they are just in the way. They are very distracting. I prefer using shortcuts or hotkeys, we say, to navigate or to work with the software. For these 3 options, we can actually use hotkeys. For example, to move or to grab this cube around the viewport, we can use grabbing tool. Grabbing tool in this case is actually any hotkey in Blender. They are very intuitive and they are easy to guess. And you can just, if you're absent-minded, you can just guess and play around, and you probably can find your way out. If you want to grab this cube, you just have to press G, press once, and then the cube will follow your cursor. You can also use S for scaling and rotate with R. If you can see on the viewport here, you have a green line and a red line. This is showing the axes. On the green line, which is now it seems horizontal, but actually in Blender, closer to me or further in front of me. Y-axis represents the depth of the objects, and the red axis, which is x-axis, that represents the width of the objects. We have the z-axis, which is the height of the objects. We don't see the z-axis here, but it is vertical. And these are the 3 coordinates. Basically, these are the 3 coordinates of your objects. For example, now everything is at the center, and we call it the world origin. And the world origin, by default, is where the 3 axes intersects. So the coordinates for this point, we have 0, 0, 0. And if you want to grab by using G, of course, if you want to grab this cube to the right-hand side of the world, or at least from your view to the right-hand side, then you can just press X because you want to restrict this grabbing motion on the X-axis. And as you move the cube to the right or to move the cube on the left, just pay attention to the top left corner. The number is changing, and it's showing you to the right, it's positive number, and to the left is negative number. This is on the X coordinate. If you want to grab it on the Y axis, so by pressing G and then Y, you can restrict it to the Y axis. If you move it further away, you have the positive number along the global Y, if you can read on the top left. If you are moving this cube closer to me or closer to you, you have the negative number. If you grab it along the Z-axis and only when you press G, Z, you will see the blue line. If you move it on top, to the top, you have the positive number. If you move it under the red line or the intersection, you have the negative number. These options can also be used on rotation. For example, if I use rotation R with the Z-axis, I'm rotating the cube only along this axis. I'm not rotating to the side, it's not tilted, but it's rotating vertically. Now, after using what we have on the left, we can see what we have on the right. And this toolbar here is basically all the information of transformation. For example, this cube is at the center now. You can see the location and the 3 coordinates. They are 0, 0, 0. There is no rotations. It's 0 degree on x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. The scaling, because I keep it untouched, the scale for the 3 coordinates, they are all 1 to 1 to 1, and which is very important. I recommend you to always try to keep the scale 1 to 1 to 1. And then the dimension, you can see the dimension of the cube now is 2 times 2. These are the information of the object you have selected. Of course, if you select the camera, then you will have the information of the camera. You select the light, you have the information of the light. And this panel, it was hidden. How do we toggle this? Is with the keyboard key N. N to show it, N to hide it. And you have this little arrow. If you click on this arrow, actually you can have this showing. These on the left, the toolbar on the left, you can also hide it with letter T or to show it with letter T. And of course, you have a little arrow here. Now, if I get rid of the 2 of them, let's focus on this little gadget and these 4 little buttons. What we have here is that you can see that this gadget represents the 3 axes, and if you just click and drag around, then you will have the viewport rotating. What we have on the left-hand side is to interact with the elements we created. What we have on the right is to interact with the 3D viewport. Now, we can rotate around this viewport, or if you are seeing what we have the options in the status bar at the bottom of the screen. If you are pressing down the middle mouse button and rotating the mouse around, then you can probably do the same. You can rotate around the viewport. Now, on the magnifier, you have the zoom in and out in the view. You just have to hold down the button and drag in and out. You can zoom in and out the viewport. You can also do the same by using or holding down Command or Control button on your keyboard. In the middle wheel button on the mouse, you can just scroll in and out. The hand here is to pan around the viewport. If you're dragging this button around, you can just pan around the viewport. If you don't want to use this key, that will be Shift and then the middle mouse button. When we click on this button, you will change to the camera view in the projects. But if you don't have a camera on the viewport, then you click this button, there is no effects. You will not be changed to the camera view. The third one is interesting because when you toggle this, then you can change to a camera view. But the thing is, you must have at least 1 camera in the projects. We do have 1 camera. Last one here is to switch the current view from perspective to orthographic projection. What we have here is the perspective view. And as you can see, this cube here, I can do a more dramatic demo for you, is that if I'm grabbing this along the y-axis, the further I send it away, the cube is getting smaller. And the closer I keep the cube, it's being bigger, right? Now, if I just quickly duplicate them for you so that we have one that is very close to us and then one is close to the world origin and one that is super far away. This is the perspective view. Anything that is closer to us, even though it's of the same scale or the same mass, it seems to look bigger. But anything that is further away, it looks smaller. What if we change to the orthographic view? Everything is the same scale now. When we change to the orthographic view, we have to zoom out to see the last cube. But you can see it is so far away, but it looks the same size as what we have here in the center of the world. So this is very useful when we want to do alignment, and there are so many demos or tutorials on YouTube teaching you how to do modeling in this view, and they look very cute. We can do some of these later on, but just so you know, for alignment and modeling, this view can be useful. Before we conclude for today, there is one last thing I want to show you, and this is very important and very useful to your journey. That is the numpad. The numpad is only appearing on the large keyboard. For example, this one I have, the numpad on the right-hand side. And if you don't have it, remember, we talked about this under the preferences. And under preferences, we have this function called emulate numpad. Now, you see what it can do, and you consider later whether you want to emulate the numpad. If I press 1 on the numpad, I'm changing to the front of the graphic. And I was having the perspective view on the viewport, right? And I told you before, if you press on this button, you can switch back and forth. However, using numpad offers you a more seamless transition. If I'm working on my project under perspective view, I press 1. This is front orthographic. If I scroll out, I will change back to perspective seamlessly. You have this front orthographic, which is very useful for aligning things. For example, if I want to put another cube on top of the cube that I already have, I can use this front orthographic and just put it on top. And I cannot do the same easily under the perspective view. This is it. 1 for front orthographic, 3 for right orthographic, 7 for top orthographic, and 0 for camera view. And you can also change to the opposite view. For example, 1 for front, right? If I'm holding down Shift, if I'm holding down the Control or Command button, I'm sorry I got distracted by the heavy rain. Yesterday it was the typhoon signal number 10. The rain is getting really crazy loud. If I'm holding down the Command key with 1, then I will change to back orthographic. If I am pressing 3, that is the right orthographic. With Control or Command, I will go to left. 7 for top orthographic. Control or Command 7, I will go to the bottom of it. Not only that, we also have another amazing function. For example, if I'm scrolling in, you can see that I'm focusing my sight in the center of the world, in the center of this cube, right? But if I want to reposition or recenter myself to the cube that is at the back of the scene, I just have to press. First, I have to select the cube, and then I have to press dot on the numpad. I'm recentered to the last cube of the scene. That is so amazing. So imagine if you are working on a very large scene and you are lost, or you just want to focus on a certain thing, then you just have to select a little element, or you can select it on the list. Press dot on the numpad. You will recenter yourself to this element of your chosen. You almost have everything for you to start modeling. And tomorrow, we are modeling. Stay tuned. Bye.